Welcome, dear reader, to a candlelit corner of the old world, where superstition lingers like mist and inked pages still whisper of wolves and ruins, of letters sealed and secrets kept. Together, we'll read through the shadows of Bram Stoker's Dracula, chapter by chapter, hearthlight by hush. So brew something warm, light a candle if you like, and let's step quietly into the dark. Welcome to this first chapter summary of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Here we begin not with blood, but with borders, with a young solicitor named Jonathan Harker crossing the threshold of what this book presents as the civilized West to the superstitious and shadowed East. It is a journey into strange beauty, old superstitions and folklore, and mounting dread. This is the Gothic art at its most classic, where landscape becomes metaphor, as you will see in this first chapter, and hospitality conceals a predator's lair. This chapter spans Jonathan's journal from May 3rd to May 5th. Think of this episode as a lantern held over the very first descent into Dracula's world. A world that is built on consumption, seduction, and symbols layered like veils. Let's step in. So the chapter begins with Jonathan, who is on a journey from England to Transylvania, where Count Dracula lives. He is coming on a professional assignment, essentially to help with real estate matters, as I understand it, for this Count Dracula, this nobleman. His journal begins in a very mundane manner. There are a bunch of train timetables, mills, which he has a growing delight for. He loves all of these paprika-laden dishes. One is called paprika hendil. That's Hendl. And as I said, he's delighting in these foreign foods. And it's kind of your basic little travel log. A note with the meals he is enjoying, he keeps on writing a little memo that he wants to get the recipe so that his Mina, which we will grow more to understand what she is to him, will be able to prepare it for him. Jonathan mentions that his small spattering of the German language is proving helpful for him at this point in the journey. He mentions that he is journeying into the Carpathian Mountains, and Bram Stoker includes the detail here that they are shaped like a horseshoe. And I want to point out that the horseshoe, especially in folklore traditions, is commonly a symbol of good luck. It holds the luck within it. Here, though, there's a parasite in it. It's contaminated. Here, it contains evil. It's almost this inverted symbol where the horseshoe, instead of being a container for luck, it is instead an entrapment of evil. Jonathan notes on his journey that as he is moving further east, the trains are less punctual. And this is where we can start to kind of pick up on a little bit of a bias that Jonathan has of the civilized West to a different East that has different priorities. Now, Jonathan recounts going to bed this first night, and he says that he did not sleep well at all because a dog was howling outside his window all night long. The howling of dogs, the howling of wolves will start to become a common thread. So note that in the back of your brain. Jonathan then continues to talk about these paprika covered foods. I keep mentioning the paprika because it stands out to me that paprika is a red spice, and colors as far as relating to blood in Dracula do stand out to me. So he keeps on talking about this, and I noticed in the text that as he almost has this hyper focus and appetite for the foods of this foreign land, it's only insofar as he can domesticate them. So, you know, he keeps on writing this memo of, oh, I want this recipe for Mina. So, you know, he can take it back home, domesticate it almost, and make it familiar to him. And the focus on consumption, I feel, starts to be brought up here with him consuming the food. Later in the tell, we may find that he's the one that is going to be consumed. And it also parallels with the dance between the masculine and feminine. Because shortly after he continues to talk about the food, there is a bit of text given to talking about the woman. There is one line in the text, in fact, where at first it made me laugh, but I think it really does give you a look at perhaps Jonathan's class bias, and perhaps also just his fear of the unfamiliar. You know, you've got this fear of getting close to something. It highlights how appearances shift with distance from something. If you have distance, there is safety. Yet, if you are near something, there is a heightened danger there. So anyway, the line that made me laugh, but I think does have more of that to it, is the woman looked pretty, except when you got near them, but they were all very clumsy about the waist. And, you know, so there's also maybe a little bit of judging beauty standards based on the fashion of different areas. Next in the text, Jonathan mentions that he arrives at the Golden Krone Hotel. Now, the Krone, Krone, is German for crown. I, being an English teacher, also noted that there's the homophone, meaning the same sounding word that has a different meaning, crone, which is one of the archetypes of the feminine. It is the old woman, and the main person that we interact with here, or that Jonathan interacts with here at the Golden Krone Hotel, is an old woman. One of the first things that he notes about the innkeeper's wife that greets him, this, I'm naming her the Golden Crowned Crone, because she is like this sentinel at the edge of the abyss for Jonathan, trying to warn him, blessing him, essentially, which we'll get into in a brief moment. But one of the first things that he notices about her is that her double apron is tight, almost too tight for modesty, he says. And again, there, I feel like it's bringing up this discomfort Jonathan has with unrestrained femininity, I suppose, that he is seeming to observe in this region. At the Golden Krone Hotel, Jonathan receives a note from Dracula, the gist of it being, you know, welcome to my land. I especially note that Dracula does say his land. And essentially he's just saying, I'm expecting you, and I've prepared for you to come and pick you up at Borgo Pass. And just, I hope your journey has been a good one, and I hope you enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. And then your friend, Dracula. So then it transitions to May 4th. And Jonathan talks about this large crowd of people. And there's just this growing chorus of superstition. A lot of these locals are saying words that Jonathan isn't quite sure about, so he looks them up in his little language guide and notices most of them have to do with, you know, demonic things, with Satan. And he mentions that many of the people make the sign of the cross on themselves, and even reach out two fingers towards him, almost like a blessing. And he learns that, you know, it's a guard, it's a charm to ward off the evil eye. The evil eye is this idea that someone with ill intent towards you, even just looking at you, can, you know, curse you. And so these people are all trying to ward off this evil eye from Jonathan. The innkeeper and his wife also seem really reluctant to talk right now. They received a letter from Dracula with instructions on helping Jonathan reach him. And with that, they just kind of clammed up and were acting like they weren't understanding the very same German that Jonathan was using the night before. The innkeeper's wife, my beloved crone, she does open up though, and she pleads with Jonathan not to go because May 4th is St. George's Day, as in St. George and the Dragon. Again, Dracula or Dracula, and its association with the word dragon is significant there. And it's almost like a Halloween in spring, where the eve is, kind of evil's last hurrah. It's a time ripe for haunting. And so she pleads with him to change his plans, to not go. And he's not really willing to change that. He's even made a memo of how he needs to ask the Count about all these superstitious people, which is ironic that he's wanting to ask Dracula about people's superstitions and fears. And the woman then, despite Jonathan trying to refuse, she makes him take a crucifix. Now, the text doesn't necessarily say a rosary with a crucifix attached, but I think based on the region that they are in and, the association of this woman trying to invoke maternal care, I think we could possibly assume that it is a rosary. And so that's where I kind of attach even greater symbolic meaning to this woman who is trying to keep him safe. And she puts the crucifix around his neck and says, "For your mother's sake." Jonathan is preparing to go, and as he is departing, and there's this crowd that is very superstitious and trying to charm and do little guards against the evil eye for him, he mentions two different trees in the courtyard, or I don't know if it's a courtyard, but in the area that he is leaving. One, he says, is a oleander tree, which I looked it up, and it's a tree that's got red, pink, and white flowers when it's flowering, and every single part of that tree is very highly toxic. Even breathing the smoke can be very harmful. And that is juxtaposed with this orange tree, which is this, vitality, full of life, a beautiful symbol of healthy life right there. So Jonathan continues on this journey on this horse-drawn carriage, and he is not the only passenger. There are other passengers with him. And as he is traveling, he mentions the bewildering mass of fruit blossoms. And immediately after that, it's followed up with talking about the grass beneath all of these abundant trees being spangled with fallen petals. And I feel like those two images already kind of show us, and the choice of saying bewildering mass, it already shows us that Jonathan is a little disoriented by all of this foreign, unfamiliar beauty. And then the fallen petals that are spangled on the grass, it's almost like celebration now in decay. And Jonathan mentions that they are going through Mittelland, which is the German for middle land. And that's speaking both geographically for the text, as well as, I will suggest to you, symbolically. They are traveling through the Carpathian mountain region. It's pointed out to Jonathan a formation called God's Seat. And almost immediately after that, he talks about how the sun is sinking and the shadows are starting to creep in around them. And so it becomes even more obvious, if it wasn't already, that he's entering this liminal space where it may be difficult to separate the sacred from the profane. They are getting close to reaching Borgo Pass, which, remember, that's where Dracula was going to have him transferred to another carriage to take him to Dracula's estate. And the carriage driver is pushing the horses really hard, even at parts where it's very steep and the horses can only go slowly. In fact, there's one part where Jonathan even says, like, I can get out and walk with the horses, and the driver's like, no, the dogs are too vicious here. Borgo Pass is also, I would say, significant in that its name shows that we're transitioning away from an area where the language is somewhat familiar and known to completely unfamiliar. My interpretation of the text, it almost feels like Jonathan is going through stages of a temple of sorts. You know, he keeps on going into the deeper layer, all with names that have very symbolic meaning. And rather than this journey ending with him at a positive holy of holies, I almost see it as these stages of a temple, starting with this, you know, this priestess, the golden crone at the edge, warning and saying, don't go into this darkness. But Jonathan continues to go through these different stages, and he's getting closer to a much smaller space at the center of this horseshoe. Maybe not at the center, but in terms of the metaphor, he's getting to the center, to this enclosed small space that's very unholy. So anyway, the weather is becoming oppressive. It says that it seems like it might thunder or storm, is my understanding. You know, it's one of those moments in literature and text where the weather is a outward showing of what is going on spiritually or metaphysically. Jonathan is pointing out or remarking on different striking features of the landscape as the driver is just trying to get the horses to this meeting place early. The other passengers continue with these little guards against the evil eye and trying to give him gifts. They get to this spot early and the horses spook. And that spooks all these passengers, and there's a lot of commotion. But then a driver arrives with a carriage and 4 coal black horses, the text says. The driver is a man that it says has a brown beard and a hat that seems to be hiding his features, but Jonathan does note in the lantern light it looks like these bright red eyes underneath the hat. And in the following paragraph, he also mentions red lips with strikingly white, sharp-looking teeth. This driver that has just arrived seems to know that the driver that Jonathan's been with on the journey to Borgo Pass seems to know that he was trying to get Jonathan there early and trying to convince him to just continue on with them and essentially don't go to Dracula's castle. This sharp-toothed driver says, you know, that's, my horses are fast and I knew what you were thinking of doing, so that's why I came early too. And he helps Jonathan load with him. He leaves with this yet unidentified person, and Jonathan notes that it seems like they're going in circles, and at one point he even kind of is like, okay, I'm gonna test this, and he realizes that they are. This perhaps can be seen as a metaphor for being trapped, for not progressing. At one point, shortly after he realizes this, Jonathan lights a match and checks his watch, and he realizes that it's shortly after midnight. A dog starts to howl. Jonathan mentions that it almost sounds like it's in agony, and then wolves start howling. Scares Jonathan, scares the horses. The driver gets out, and he mentions like a horse tamer is able to soothe them really effectively. They pass a place that has trees arching over, and then a tunnel, and then a cleft between 2 large frowning rocks. And again, the imagery of going through a canal of sorts to this center place, but it's an unholy center place. Notice is present there. And then it starts to snow. And I want to point out to you that snow is a material that the things resting beneath a blanket of snow, they are not necessarily dead. They are dormant, but not dead. So it's a symbol of things in suspension. And then we have blue flames starting to appear. The driver sees them too, jumps to go to it, and he does that repeatedly. Jonathan almost wonders if he's dreaming because it happens so often. It mentions at one point some stones are used to make some device. It does not really give more detail than that. And then at another point, Jonathan seems to think that he saw a flame through the driver's body, almost like he was transparent or not fully there. Then we have aggressive, excessive wolf howling, and it seems to be circling them as they move and as they get nearer to their destination. The moonlight is out, and that seems to spur on the howling and the wolves even more. Jonathan is justifiably terrified, but the driver seems to have some sort of sway over these vicious, man-hungry wolves, because he gets out, and my understanding is makes this motion, and the wolves listen to him and disperse. At least disperse enough for them to go on through. A heavy cloud then passes over the moon, and they are again shrouded in darkness. Jonathan is too scared to speak or move, he says. They finally get to what he describes as a ruined castle. He mentions tall black windows, which, I believe is a bit of an oxymoron, or at least showing just the void that he is going into as something that absorbs darkness rather than light and reflects back no light as well. Them being at that courtyard, arriving at the castle, is the conclusion of chapter 1. In this chapter, it has been ended now with not full terror, but almost a little bit of a hush. We think we're at this now safe place, or at least perhaps that's what Jonathan thinks. Maybe he's starting to wonder if there was something to all the town folks' folk beliefs and fears for him. And Jonathan Harker has fully passed into Dracula's world. It is this veiled and violated holy space where Gothic horror begins to steep. In the next chapter, we will cross the castle's threshold to meet the Count face to face. So make sure to come back for chapter 2, where hospitality turns to haunting. If this hopefully detail-rich summary has sparked something for you, please make sure to like, share, and follow my channel, as well as comment any of your thoughts on the symbols in this chapter or Jonathan's reactions to things in this chapter in the comment section. Perhaps let me know what your favorite Gothic symbol that came up in this chapter may be, and I'd love to know what has stayed with you from this chapter summary. If this video brought something to life for you, you can support my work through Buy Me a Coffee or explore the tools I use to create these series down below. Every little gesture truly does help keep this corner of bookish candlelight glowing.